This
Hi, ev-
conference will now be recorded.
Hi everyone. My name is Christine Crawford. I'm a librarian and I work out of the Lawrence branch of the Mercer County Library System. And I'd also like to welcome you all here today. I'm really looking forward to today's program. But before we get started, I just want to mention a couple of upcoming programs that you might be interested, including one that's tomorrow, Thursday, April 6th at 7 p.m. This is a virtual program and it's called Women of New York. And Marty Schneid is going to join us, and he's going to detail the history of women who made significant contributions to New York and the world at large at a time in United States history when full equality for women was not yet recognized. This is probably going to be a really interesting program. Marty Schneid is a New Yorker and a historian, and he's lectured at a lot of institutions like the New York Public Library, Fordham University. So that's going to be a really interesting program. We have another virtual program on Monday, April 10th at 6:30 p.m. And this one is Benefits of Acupressure for Pain Management and Physical Therapy. And this is going to detail holistic interventions for improving pain, fatigue, anxiety, and stress. And it will introduce community members to acupressure as an evidence-based practice in physical therapy. So that's another virtual program that you might like. And then in person on Tuesday, April 18th at 6:30, we have our Trashed Art Contest reception. The library system is hosting its 14th annual Trashed Art Contest, where we celebrate Earth Day by having people make art out of things that might otherwise be garbage. And then we create a contest out of it. So that reception and award ceremony is going to be on the 18th at 6:30. And there are some really interesting pieces this year. So I do recommend that. And now I am very happy to introduce to you our speaker for today. Today we have Heidi Mass joining us. Heidi is a member of the Washington Crossing Audubon Society. And the Audubon Society is a nonprofit organization dedicated to the enjoyment and protection of birds, wildlife, and the environment through education, research, and conservation. And Heidi has been birding for many years, and she provides lectures like these and similar ones for the Princeton Adult School. And some of these educational experiences also include birding field trips to some of the excellent birding locations we have in Mercer County and throughout New Jersey. So like I said earlier, I'm really looking forward to today's presentation. Um, I love to sit out in my own backyard and watch the birds, even though I'm not any sort of expert on birding. So I'm really excited to hear today's lecture. And I think it's great for this time of year when we're all ready to get back outside after the long, cold winter. So I am going to, like Laura, I am going to disappear, but I will keep my eye on the chat box for questions, which we'll go through at the end. And right now I will hand it over to Heidi. Thank you, Heidi.
Oh, thank you. Um, all right, I am going to go ahead and start the slideshow, and I'm used to doing Zoom, so this is a new platform for me. So um, I'm just gonna go ahead. I think I might disappear from my own screen. So, but hopefully this will all go well. Um, all right, so we're gonna do uh, start out with our title here is Birdwatching 101, and as I was introduced, I'm a member of Washington Crossing Audubons, which is your closest chapter for the from the National Audubon, and obviously your library is sponsoring this. So let's just get right down to it. What do you need to watch birds? You need an interest in nature, good observation skills, good binoculars, and good field guides. And we're going to talk about all of those things today. So the first thing we're going to talk about is binoculars, and I'm going to give you some examples of a couple of different kinds. The important thing to know is that the optic technology over the last 20 years has improved so much that now for about $200 you can get a decent pair of binoculars. Also, some of you may remember the old-fashioned binoculars your grandparents had. They were pretty big and clunky, and the newer binoculars now are much more streamlined. Their optics are in a straight line versus sort of that zigzag line from the old-fashioned binoculars. and you're able to hold them with much better ease. They also have the eye cups that turn up and down versus
Heidi?
the old-fashioned rubber things that you had to fold
Heidi?
over. Yeah,
Heidi, I'm going to interrupt you for a minute. I'm sorry. This is Christine. We don't see the slides progressing.
good binoculars and good field guides. And then we just are going to start talking about some binoculars. So the first one, as I was saying, you get for $200 now, you can get a decent pair of binoculars. The shape and size is much different from the ones your grandparents had. They're much easier to focus. The optics have improved tremendously. So the first one is a $200 pair. If you go to the next slide, it'll show you another $276 pair of Nikons. And then if you go to the following slide, you have a $499 pair of Zeiss. So as you can see, the prices just keep going up depending on the quality of the optics. And if you go to the next slide, basically I've been showing you several brands of binoculars. You have Nikon's, Monarchs, you got Vortex. The more expensive ones are the Zeiss, the Leica, and the Swarovski. And as I said, prices can range from $500 to $2,800. So if you get really hooked on birding and become a crazy bird watcher, you'll go out and spend that $2,800. But we're going to talk more about the things that beginning bird watchers can use. So we're going to go to the next slide. And here we have our field guides and our apps. And I always recommend that beginning bird watchers start with a bird book, a field guide that covers the eastern United States. There are many different field guides. Some of them are for the whole country, some are for the West Coast, the East Coast. But definitely start with an East Coast bird book, because if you look up a picture and you go, oh, I saw that bird, and then you look at where its geographical range is and you find out it's in California, not in New Jersey. So that's why it's good to start with an East Coast bird. The other bird book is Birds of New Jersey Field Guide, and that's really good for beginners. It's also good both for kids. It does it by color. And then the last thing is Merlin is a free app from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And if you go on the Cornell Lab of Ornithology website and go to their All About Birds, they have so much information. You could ask any question. They have different courses. They have maps. They have lists of bird festivals, all different things that you can do. And it's very, very informative. The nice thing about Merlin is that they have recently added a feature where you can record the bird that you're actually listening to, and it will tell you what that bird is. When this first came out a few years ago, it was not very good at all, but now it works pretty well. And I say to people, use it for your backyard birds. When you're listening to the birds in your backyard, and learn the songs that your backyard birds are singing, and that will help you get a good start. So, okay, go to the next slide. If you can.
Did that come through?
There it goes. Okay, great. I just found this book last summer. I found it at a nature store in Vermont. And it's actually been out for a few years, but it is a book that is geared for 8 to 12-year-olds. However, I love this book. It really simplifies a lot of things and puts it in terms with pictures that the author has drawn about bird watching, and very, very helpful. And it takes a lot of the things that I'm going to talk to you about and put it in this book. If you go to the next slide, this is a very similar book, but more geared for adults. And this also only came out a few years ago, and all about birds for the Northeast. And what I do is I call this a textbook for bird watching. There has never been a book written that tells you how to bird watch. All the books you find on birds are field guides, which are basically pictures and lists of birds with their ranges, a description of the bird, and things like that, but never telling you how to do bird watching. As it was mentioned, I do a course for the Princeton Adult School, and I do 3 one-hour lectures along with 3 field trips. They basically took all my lectures and put them in this book, and it is fantastic. So if you decide you really want to learn a lot more about bird watching, this is a great book. Both of these books are available online. I just checked last week, and they're both, there are editions that are available. All right, next slide. So now we're going to talk about how do you identify birds. So it's not just as simple as looking at the bird. One of the big things is the song. All the birds have very individual songs, each species. Different birds have different shapes of their body, their wings, their bill, and their tail. How does it behave? Is this a bird that sort of sulks in the undergrowth that you never see, you only hear? Or is this a bird that perches on the top of the tree and sings all day? And another thing to think about is, where are you? Are you in the woods? Are you in the city? Are you near a marsh or the beach? The birds that are on the beach or down by the marshes are much different than the birds that are in the woodlands. And even along rivers, you will get different kinds of birds. And then you want to think about, how does it fly? Does it swim in the water? Does it only wade in the water? So think about ducks, they always swim, but then you have shorebirds that they will wade in the water and walk in the water looking for food. And then you're going to look for field marks. And these are the things that are emphasized in the field guides. Things like the color of the bird, whether it has an eye stripe or an eye ring, whether it has wing bars, what kind of pattern is on the tail. So if you continue on that and go to the next slide, this is all called, in the bird world, general impression, size, and shape. And what I like to relate it to is, if you're walking down the street and somebody's coming up the street towards you and they're walking a dog, you can look at that dog and you go, oh, that's a golden retriever. And you know it's a golden retriever by the color of the dog, the length of its hair, the size of the dog. It's a pretty large dog, and its general features. It's the same thing if you see a German Shepherd or a poodle. You know that what you're looking at based on sort of that general impression, size, and shape. And then take it another step forward to family members. So we all know how you go and meet someone, and your family, if you go to meet somebody and you're with your sister and you've never met them before, they'll say, oh, you look just like your sister, or something like that. So, or you see your kid running across a baseball field. You know it's your kid that's running across because you know how that kid walks and runs, what color their hair is, what their physical shape is. So apply all those same things that you do just normally to watching birds. And the other thing then, this slide that's up there now is, and this is a silhouette page that is the cover, inside the cover page of the Peterson Field Guide. And again, this is your general impression, size, and shape. So you look at all these different birds, and right there in the middle of the slide, you can see a bird that's sort of perched upright in the middle of that tree with a big bill. That's a woodpecker. All woodpeckers perch the same way. On the left side of that tree, you've got a blue jay. Up on the wires, way up there, you have a mourning dove with that long tail, skinny tail. And down at the bottom, you have that big shape of a pheasant. How many times have we seen pictures of pheasants in art and um, all sorts of magazines? And just that shape just reminds you that's what a pheasant looks like. So, okay, so go to the next slide. All right, and this was my epiphany when I started bird watching, is that field guides are organized into families. And again, go back to thinking about your families of dogs. You've got golden retrievers, you've got poodles, you've got beagles, things like that. So again, if you look at the slide on the upper left, you have ducks. All ducks have that similar shape and profile. If you look at a gull, there are many different kinds of gulls, but most gulls are white, gray, and black. And there's that woodpecker in the middle of the picture again that I was talking about. See the way he sits on the tree. Again, that blue jay behind below the woodpecker. So these are all different families. The robin is in a thrush family. Below the robin, you have sparrows. There's a sparrow family. Then you have a finch family. The bright yellow bird on the upper right is the goldfinch. And then you have cardinals, and below that you have a warbler. And all warblers are very little birds. They flit around in the treetops, and they have long, thin beaks because they're insect eaters. So let's go in, and the next slide will give you a little bit more details. So as we were talking about the woodpeckers, these are three of our most common woodpeckers that you would see in your backyard. On the left is the flicker. The one in the middle is a red-bellied woodpecker. That seems like a misnomer. I'll talk about that. And then on the right is the downy woodpecker. So the flicker on the left is a large woodpecker. And many times in the fall, you will see them on the ground because their favorite food are ants. So in the fall, when they're trying to stock up on calories, you'll see them on the ground. It used to be called the yellow-shafted flicker because if you look at the tail, you see that yellow that's there. The shaft of the feather is actually yellow. So now the red-bellied woodpecker that's in the middle, the reason it's called red-bellied is that it literally does have a few red feathers on its belly. Many people tend to call it a red-headed woodpecker, but it is not. There is actually another woodpecker that has an entire red head. What you have to think about is many of these birds were identified back in the 1800s. And the 1800s, when you went bird watching, that involved a shotgun. You went out, you shot the bird, you picked up the bird, and you identified it for science. So when a person was looking at this woodpecker that had the little red feathers on its bellies, that's what they decided to call it. On the right is the downy woodpecker. That's our smallest woodpecker. You can see how tiny that beak is. And they're a black and white bird like that. So those are the three woodpeckers that are in our backyards. And if you look at all of them, the woodpeckers all have very similar features. Okay, next slide. So then you have the thrushes. The most common one around here are the robins, the American robins. And again, look at these three birds. Look how they perch. Look at their beak size. Look at the shape of their head. They all look very similar. They're in the same family. The robins are a typical backyard bird. They are on our front lawns. They're in our trees. The wood thrush, which is in the middle, is actually my favorite bird. If you look up its song, it has an incredibly beautiful song, sounds like a flute. That is a bird of woodlands. So you're not going to find that on the edges or in your backyard. You really have to live next to a woods or go into the woods to hear that bird. And then you have the bluebirds. The bluebirds are another bird that love to be around people, and everyone has heard about putting up a bluebird box. And these are a thrush, and they have it's very hard to describe their song. It's not a loud song. It's a very quiet song. It's sort of a little gurgling sound. But you can't miss that beautiful blue color. And they'll perch on wires, they'll perch on fence posts. So if you have a yard that has an open grassy area, you're going to see bluebirds. If you have a lot of trees in your yard, you're not going to have bluebirds. All right, next slide, please. And then we have the finches, and these birds are very common in New Jersey. The one on the left, the red one, is a house finch, and the one on the right is a goldfinch. And these pictures show you an example of how the birds, the females and the males, look differently. So the male is the brightly colored birds. In the bird world, the males got all the glory. They get all the finery, they get all the great looking feathers, and the females are very dull looking and cryptic. And you have to think about why is that? Because they are sitting on the nest. They do not want predators to find their nest and either eat the eggs or kill their babies. So both the house finch and the goldfinch, the females are very dull. Finches have strong beaks. They're the ones that will come to your bird feeder and eat sunflower seeds. And they're very common. You will find them sort of all over the place. All right, next slide. And so now we're going to talk a little bit about migration. An important thing to know about bird watching is that there are many birds that don't stay in New Jersey all year round. We have our resident birds, some of which you saw in some of the previous slides, the woodpeckers, the cardinals, and a lot of sparrows will stay in New Jersey all year round. But there are other birds that only come to New Jersey in the wintertime. For instance, the left one is the dark-eyed junco. And then there are other birds that only come to New Jersey in the summertime. And that would be the yellowbird on the right, the warbler, the yellow warbler that's there. So if you go to the next slide. So here we have a range map, and this is what has been documented as to where this bird lives. And you can see on the map of the United States that what is called its breeding range is the brown, and that bird will breed in New Jersey along with much of the northern United States. And then you see the blue down in Central America. That is where that bird goes to in the wintertime. Now, why would this bird migrate? The reason all birds migrate has to do with climate, food, and nesting ability. So a warbler is an insect feeder, and in the northern United States, all the insects die in the wintertime, so it would have nothing to eat. So it migrates all the way down to Central America. And some of these birds will actually fly across the Gulf of Mexico, and some of them will sort of take the long way around down through Texas and Mexico. But they go there for the winter, and then they come back here. And when they come back here, they're coming back at this time of year. They are looking for all those insects that are starting to hatch in North America. And I don't know if you've ever been walking down the road and you see all these little tiny green spiders that will hang down, not spiders, sorry, caterpillars that hang down from an oak tree. That's what they're here to eat, is all those little caterpillars. And it takes thousands of caterpillars to raise one clutch of eggs. So that's what they're doing. So, okay, go to the next slide. And then we talked about the dark-eyed junco. Now look at this map. The junco breeds up in Canada and in the northern portions of the country. And it's a little hard to see, but he only comes down to New Jersey in the wintertime. Because in the wintertime, even though he's a seed eater, there's not a lot of seeds that are around up in the Northeast, let's say in Maine. So he comes down to New Jersey and the Mid-Atlantic, and as you see across the country, he comes down there for the winter, and he's the one that always shows up at your feeder. They are still here. They'll probably leave next month or the end of this month to go back up north to nest. They do not nest in New Jersey. They go back to their breeding territory. Okay, so the next slide. Now this is an example of a bird that stays here all year round. So this is a cardinal. Cardinals are seed eaters, but they are also insect eaters. So they have the best of both worlds. They can live here in the winter and they can live here in the summer. And so as you can see, they're mostly an eastern bird across to the mountains, and then they can't get across those big mountain ranges to the west. So they're all along here, along the eastern coast and in New Jersey. Now, cardinals are also one of those birds that has been helped by bird feeding. When I was growing up in Maryland back in the 1960s, I had an uncle who would come down from New Jersey for the holidays, and he was so excited to see cardinals because in the 1960s there were no cardinals in New Jersey. And what has happened is that with the popularity of bird feeding, we've been able to help birds like the cardinal, and another bird is the red-bellied woodpecker, to get through the winter, and they are able to stay here all year round. They don't get killed by the bad weather because we have food available for them. So that's one of those good things that happens when we feed birds. Okay, the next slide. So that was a really brief introduction to bird watching. And basically, I'm not going over too many species because I could spend probably 10 or 15 minutes talking about each species and where they live and where they go and things like that. But I just wanted to give you a brief introduction. So the thing is that you need to just look around you and look at the birds that live in your backyard. Try to figure out who they are. Use that Merlin app to listen to their songs and try looking at some field guides and look them up and learn all about them. And the most important thing is have fun. Don't let it get to you as a hobby that is going to cause you pain. It is a hobby you should enjoy and have fun. And then the next slide is I just wanted to talk a little bit about Washington Crossing Audubon, and that is their website. They offer spring and fall bird watching trips in the area. And also the other organization in the state that offers a lot of bird watching trips is New Jersey Audubon. And they, again, that's njaudubon.org is their website. And all of these different places that I mentioned can really help you with getting started on bird watching, the books that I mentioned. And my only other suggestion is when you're looking for binoculars, don't buy them online without going to a couple stores and actually putting the binoculars in your hand, because all of our faces are different. Some of us have very wide spaced eyes, others have our eyes close together. You really need to be able to hold those binoculars up to your face and see if they fit your hands and your face. Again, if you have questions about binoculars, either of those organizations can help you out. All right, I guess I'm done, and do we have any questions? Oops, wait a minute. Somebody must have muted. There you go.
There you go. Sorry, I muted myself. There we go. Amy
Okay.
Marie says at the moment she's in Washington Crossing listening to this, which is kind of fun.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And Dom asks about the origin of birds and how were they created?
Oh my goodness. Well, it all goes back to the dinosaurs. There's a very famous bird called Archaeopteryx, was one of the first birds that was actually, they found a complete fossil of, and it was one of the first birds where they actually found fossilized feathers, because if you think about it, feathers are very fragile, and so they they don't preserve well in the fossil world. So yes, they did evolve from dinosaurs, and after the dinosaurs went extinct is when these small mammals and the birds started to evolve. And if you look at the bird tree, it goes in about 40 million different directions. But yes, that's where they came from. It's a short answer.
Before I ask the next question, I just want to mention that after our presentation today, our audience members will receive an email, and it does have a list of resources. I know it includes the Washington Crossing Audubon website on it, and I believe the New Jersey one as well. And then while you were talking, I just did check our catalog, and we do have both this book, the Look Up book, and this one in the library system. So just
No
so people
kidding.
know
Oh,
that.
that is
Yep.
wonderful. Great.
So,
Great.
so those two you can get through the library
Absolutely.
if people are interested. So let me see what other questions we have here. Robert asked, do you know anything about hawks eating smaller birds?
Yes. I didn't really talk about hawks today, but in the wintertime, there is a hawk called a Cooper's hawk. And that bird loves to hang out at bird feeders because actually its prey is small birds. And it's a forest hawk, and it has a very long tail, and it glides through the forest. And they love to hang out at bird feeders and eat the birds that come to feeders. But that is a normal thing. They are predators and they do consume other birds.
Thank you. All right. Any recommendations about binoculars if you wear glasses?
So the key with wearing glasses is the focal length between your face and the binocular. Um, Again, this is hard to say, but there's not one particular brand. It used to be many years ago that it was very difficult to find glasses that would or binoculars that would work with glasses. I would stick with some of the major brands that I mentioned: the Vortex, the Nikon, Zeiss, all in that $200 to $500 range, and I think you would be very helpful. I can actually mention one place in Levittown, Pennsylvania, is Allen's Camera, and the shop carries also binoculars, and they will help you in choosing a binocular that fits your face.
And while we're talking about binoculars, Corinne asks if you could explain the 8 by 42 and diopters as they pertain to the binoculars.
Oh, okay, sure. So the magnification is 8. And that is and actually, I apologize. I probably should have talked a little bit more about that. The magnification is 8. 42 is your field of view. This is all done in millimeters. And the most common binocular that you would use right now is an 8 by 42 or an 8 by 32. They give you a nice field of view and they give you good magnification. I would not get anything above an 8. There are 10s and 12s, but those are for people who do things like hawk watching, where they're trying to look at specks in the sky, or if you're doing a lot of shorebirds, where you're looking out over marshes. But for starters, I use an 8 by 42, and I've been using that for years, and I'm very happy with it.
We have lots of questions. Caroline asks if you can recommend types of bird houses.
Yes. The best thing to do is get what's called a bluebird box, because other birds will nest in it also. Not every bird will nest in a box. The only birds that nest in boxes are cavity nesters. So a bluebird is a cavity nester, a chickadee, a titmouse, a nuthatch. Those are all cavity nesters. Unfortunately, so are house sparrows. You do not want a house sparrow in your nest box. They're a very aggressive bird. They're a very mean bird, and they will kill other birds in your yard. So it would take a little while to explain, but if you look up how to get rid of house sparrows in your nest box, that'll give you that reason. The easiest thing to say is that if you have a very messy nest in your box, it probably is a house sparrow. the other birds that you're looking at that build in nest boxes do a very nice, well-built nest. Let's put it that way. And if you want to buy bird houses, the big box stores have them, but also right in Pennington, Rosedale Mills has them. And if anybody is near Belmead, the Belmead Co-op, which is in Montgomery, has them also.
Okay, and then a few questions about feeders, types, if there's a recommended type of bird feeder,
Yeah,
recommended type of bird food, and somebody asked if it's okay to just sprinkle it on the ground if you don't have a
yeah.
feeder.
I didn't do bird feeders in this particular lecture, but that would be a great fall lecture to do, would be a bird feeding lecture. There's many different kinds of feeders. There are platform feeders, there are tube feeders. There are what they call a hopper feeder. It looks like a little house. All of those are good. They all appeal to different species of birds. And there are some birds that will only feed on the ground. So yes, you can sprinkle feed on the ground, and I do it. As far as bird seed goes, the two things that are very important are never buy your bird seed from the grocery store because it has really cheap seed in it that the birds will not eat. And the other thing, if you buy what's called a mixed seed, you do not want the seed that is called Milo, M-I-L-O. It's a little red seed. It's a Western grain. So East Coast birds don't know what it is, and they will not eat it. So if you want to buy a mixed seed, make sure it does not have Milo in it. The other thing that you should buy are black sunflower seeds. Those have a high degree of fat, and in the wintertime, that's really good for the birds.
And is it okay, someone asks if it's okay to have a bird feeder in your yard in the summer, even though they need it, I guess, more in the winter?
Right. There's pros and cons. I've kept my bird feeders up year round. In the summertime, you don't have to feed them as much. There's plenty of insects for them to eat, which is what they need to feed their baby birds. But then on the other hand, sometimes you'll have the adults will bring, once the babies have fledged out of the nest, they'll actually bring the babies to the bird feeders, and that's really cool to see.
Okay. Is it okay if we do a few more?
Absolutely. I'm
great.
good.
All right. When you look up to see a raptor, about what percentage are vultures versus hawks?
Okay. So we have two types of vultures in New Jersey. We have a black vulture and a turkey vulture. And the vultures are a very lightweight bird. And so the wind will make they're not very steady when they fly. So they tend to do this sort of seesawing effect in the air. And turkey vultures tend to fly with their wings in what's called a dihedral. So if you see a bird like that, that's probably a turkey vulture. And if he's also wobbling back and forth. If you look up turkey vultures and black vultures, you can see the plumage difference. The difference being that the turkey vultures have a white line of feathers along the whole wing, whereas the black vultures only have white on the edges of their wings. A hawk tends to fly with a flatter wing spread, not up in a dihedral. And the most common hawk we have around here is a red-tailed hawk. There was one in the picture. I don't know if you can scroll all the way back.
This one.
Next picture down.
Next one.
There on the bottom left is a red-tailed hawk, and that's an adult. So it takes them a year to get to the red tail. But if you look at their wings, see how really big and sturdy they are. And that bird has a lot of flying power. So that bird can glide and hover and really maneuver. So those are the birds, the most common hawk that you will see. The smaller hawks that you see that are at your bird feeder, those are called the Cooper's hawks.
Okay. And a bluebird family and a house sparrow family are checking out our birdhouse. How can we encourage the bluebirds and discourage the house sparrows?
Ah, there you go. So that house sparrow, that's the one I was telling you about. What it's going to be a battle. What you have to do is the male house sparrow is extremely territorial, and as I said, they will kill other birds. They're not a very nice bird. The other problem is that the house sparrow is an introduced bird. He's from Europe, and it is because of the house sparrow and starlings, which are another introduced birds. They are both cavity nesters, and they have been displacing our native cavity nesters. So that has been the whole problem with these introduced birds in this country. What you need to do is that house sparrow will start building a nest. And as I said, it's going to be really messy. He's going to get all sorts of grass. It's mostly made of grass, like almost straw and hay type things. And he's just going to stuff that birdhouse full of these grasses. And what you have to do is take it out every day. And eventually he will get discouraged and move and go to a different place. The bluebird nest, on the other hand, is a nice little cup nest that they build in the bottom of the box, and it's in a cup, and it looks like what you think of when you think of a nest. That's the best advice I can give you right now.
Okay, and Holly says that the New Jersey Audubon Society also sells and can help fit binoculars.
Yes, so there are two offices that have binoculars. One is in Bernardsville, which is good 45 minutes north, and the other one is in Cape May, down in at their office in Cape May. In the fall, they have a festival, the Fall Cape May Festival. Every binocular maker in the world comes to this festival, and you can walk around in the convention center and try out a ton of different binoculars at all different price points and find the one that works for you. And that's how I bought my first binocular when I really started getting serious about bird watching. I went to that fall festival, and that's where I was able to get a really good binocular.
Okay, and there's one more question about the diopters and the binoculars.
Okay, go ahead. Or is it
Just
just
how it relates to binoculars. What is the
Oh, okay. So the diopter, if you can go back to one of those pictures of
Yes.
binoculars. So the diopter is the part on the very top of the binocular, and that is what you would use to focus for if you wear glasses or not. And so those move, and those are what I was talking about, how the old-fashioned ones had these cups that you would turn down, these rubber cups. Now they turn, and that if you don't wear glasses, you would leave them turned down. If you do wear glasses, no, I'm sorry, the opposite. If you wear glasses, you leave them turned down. If you do not wear glasses, you would turn them up, because if you think about it, your glasses sit a little bit farther away from your eyes. So you have that it's really the distance between your eye and that diopter is what gives you the ability to focus.
So that's this part here that I'm pointing at, right?
Yep,
So that just twists in or out depending on if you have the glasses or not.
And yeah, so if you wear glasses, you would twist it down, and if you do not wear glasses, it would be twisted up, and that gives you the correct, what they call focal length, between your eyeball and that binocular.
Thank you. All right. Which type of hawks hunt backyard chickens?
Cooper's hawks again. Actually, an old-fashioned name for Cooper's is a chicken hawk. And I have a friend in Plainsboro that has chickens, and she's lost several chickens to a local Cooper's hawk. So, yep, that's the one. And it's usually a big female. So in the hawk world, the female hawks are big, and in terms of size compared to the males. And so she's got a big female Cooper's hawk that is hunting her chickens.
All right. Do you know if Best Buy carries binoculars? Someone is asking Best Buy.
I'm going to guess they do. I've not ever looked for them there, so I couldn't help you on that.
They
All
do.
right. Oh, Laura says they do.
Yes, they do.
Okay, okay.
Thank
Again,
you,
but
Laura.
I don't know how much the salespeople really know about selling you binoculars. So that's why I'm saying if you can go to Allen's Camera Store in Levittown, which isn't very far at all, or go to the New Jersey Audubon Store in Bernardsville or Cape May.
Okay. And David asks, is it okay not to feed birds in the summer?
Oh, absolutely. It's a, that yeah. Many people don't like to feed them in the summer because they're worried about the seed getting on the ground and rotting in the heat. So yes, absolutely, it's not a problem at all. You don't have to feed birds. Period. It's. I think people get a lot. Sometimes I say people get more out of feeding birds than the birds do, but they obviously do. It does help them survive the winter.
Okay, and that may be our last question. We have Corinne recommended Alan's camera. She said Alan's camera is awesome. And we have a couple
Great.
people saying thank you and they enjoyed the presentation. It was very
Oh, thank
informative.
you. And I'm so
Please,
sorry about the mix up with the slideshow, but I'm glad you were able to get it to
we
work.
got it going. We got it going. It was great. So if anybody has one last minute question or wants to, if I missed something that they want to reiterate, um, otherwise, I think we're good.
Wonderful. Well, they were all great questions, and I'm sorry I couldn't cover more in a short presentation, but I hope that we got the basics down and that people were able to get some help.
Yeah, and maybe we can rearrange something for the fall about feeding. That's a good
I think
idea.
that would be a great idea. Great.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, and lots of thank you messages in our chat box. I think everybody's very appreciative. Thank you so much for joining us today, Heidi.
Okay.
Um, and
Thank
if
you.
anybody has questions, follow-up questions later, you can always contact the library and we can reach out to Heidi on your behalf.
Absolutely.
And like I said, you
Yes.
will be getting a follow-up email that has some resources. Um, and at least those two books that were in the presentation, I know we do have at some of our branches, so you can find
Oh,
those
that
there.
is wonderful to hear. Somebody got ahead of me and they ordered them. Great.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay.